government shutdown season again. Only about 2 months later,
Ah,
we're back again. I think,
I can't believe
it's
it. Yeah, this is.
as of Friday evening. This is definitely unfortunate, but the story is that at the end of the prior week, the House passed a bill to keep the government open, to keep funding going, a very kind of non controversial, vanilla extension of funding bill. And then with some of the unfortunate events in Minnesota over that weekend, Chuck Schumer came out with kind of the same playbook again. So if we look back to this past October, we're kind of in the same situation where the bill was ready to go. It passed in the House, but then in the Senate, the Republicans don't have enough votes.
Yeah, so there is a filibuster, which if something is not in budget and reconciliation, then it needs 60 votes basically in the Senate. That's not totally what happens. It's just sort of an understanding now that if you don't get 60, that they'll do a filibuster, meaning they in the past they would just talk and debate it to death until they were happy. Like someone in the minority would do it. But then there's a rule whereby if you had 60 votes, and you could overrule them just talking about it forever. And that's essentially what they mean by a filibuster. So, but you just ignore all of that and just go straight to, okay, you need super majority, you need 60 votes. If it's not budget and reconciliation, which I guess this isn't.
What was your view last week? Why did you feel that we wouldn't have a shutdown?
I just saw something in the news. I must have misread it. I guess I thought it passed and it just went through the House, and I must have just skimmed it and thought it was done. It was a mistake. I think I just read it way too fast. But I got the impression just from the commentary that this wasn't going to be a thing, and I was wrong. So admittedly, I didn't put a whole lot. We didn't cover that really last week. It was literally like two sentences. But in the episode last week.
At that time, it generally was understood that it was passed by the House without fanfare. It was going to be done the same way in the Senate this coming, this the week after. But then something happened, and then to me, it looks like Chuck Schumer kind of pulled the same tactic.
Yeah. Um, and it kind of throws. Originally, I changed my analysis for why you would do the shutdowns. I thought it was mostly to win elections, but no, let me know. I don't think there is any election coming up in the next month or two. Obviously there are big midterms. That's not for a while. Maybe it's just another tactic to do what they're saying, which is to kind of shut down the DHS funding. Which again, this is not a political thing, so I don't want to go too far down that road, but we'll just wait and see. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess reasons aside, I think the point is that it is. I don't know if it's shocking, certainly disappointing that this has already happened again.
Yeah, this can't just be like a normal thing. This is just like something to expect now, which is sad.
I think about the perception of and overall stability of the system, and so if this is something, it's like, okay, now we're going to have to. We've got these unknowns every time the previous funding bill ends. Are we going to have a shutdown again? Are services going to stop? Is GDP going to get hit? At the same time, everything that's been going on at the Fed now over the past year with Trump, he's been applying all of this political pressure on the Fed. If you get into this environment where people are less sure of what Congress is going to be able to do, at the same time less sure that of what the Fed is going to be able to do, i.e., are they going to be basically just pushed by politics in the same direction, which we see through Congress? That's not a very good direction. If the Fed becomes subject to the same kind of chaos, what is what does that mean for America?
And we're starting to see, I guess, norms change. It's just an acceptable thing. You think could this be another push for getting rid of the filibuster, which is kind of scary? I know Joe Manchin in his book Dead Center devoted a whole chapter to arguing for the filibuster. And he was one of the few Democrats to go against the party, he and Sinema, when Schumer wanted to get rid of the filibuster a while back. He voted against it. But there's all this rattling and stuff about trying to go ahead and get rid of it from Trump. Trump wants to get rid of it. Elon Musk wants to get rid of it. So the argument there just being, well, is once the Dems get back in power, they're going to get rid of it. So why not just get ahead of it and do it?
Yeah, so like in one sense, like if they did do that, I guess the downside is just every time that one party is in power, they could just have, much more free reign of doing whatever they wanted to do. But at the other end, you wouldn't have these government shutdowns anymore. So I guess like what's worse really? I guess greater volatility in legislation that gets passed or shutdowns that continue to happen periodically. Just kind of overall like weaken the credibility of the US government. And, at a time when the deficit and the national debt is so high and just keeps growing more and more and more, it just seems like just a recipe for a really nasty outcome.
Yeah. It's a known goal, definitely. Shooting yourself in the foot. But all right.
Lastly, on this topic of government fiscal stability, not too long ago we talked about the Japanese yen and JGB interest rates yet again. So there's very similar things happening over in Japan as they are in America. Growing fiscal deficits, political instability at the top, and some of the outcomes there are basically pretty negative on those countries overall. So in Japan's case, we've been seeing interest rates spike with the yen weakening at the same time. We've talked about this a couple of different times now over the past couple of months on this show. One of the interesting things that happened, though, at the end of last week was that after the yen was weakening pretty aggressively over the past few weeks before that, it was getting really close to this kind of psychological level that over the previous year, the Bank of Japan intervened in currency markets whenever the yen got close to this level of 160 yen per dollar. So at the end of last week, it was getting really close to that again. And then by the end of the week, then there started to be rumors going around that the New York Fed was calling up Wall Street banks, asking for quotes on the dollar yen pair. So unfortunately, I wasn't there. They weren't intervening whenever you and I were at the Fed, Luke. But so all the central banks, to some extent, they all kind of work together at some level as well. There's this exchange of information, of market color, of just mechanics of market functioning. And so one of the things the Bank of Japan does is it relies on the New York Fed to help with some of its yen transactions whenever it does intervene in the currency markets. So whenever they're thinking about it, or whenever it's imminent that they're going to, the Bank of Japan will call up the New York Fed. The New York Fed has all of the very close contacts with all the Wall Street banks, and then the Fed will then kind of call around to all the banks and ask for a quote. So the New York Fed does not intervene in foreign currency markets in kind of unannounced ways like that. So whenever this happens, it's a big story. Everyone's thinking, it's the Bank of Japan's going to be buying yen. So all of these trades that are betting on the weakening yen that had been going on, for weeks and months now, if you're on the wrong side of that, whenever the BOJ steps in, you can get crushed pretty quickly. So that was the big story. And the yen did strengthen substantially around the time whenever these things were happening, whenever these rumors were going around. And it carried into the following week. And, I thought it was going to be one of the big stories ongoing, because also the week began with a rapidly weakening dollar. So this was a function of a lot of the things that Trump has been talking about recently, a lot of just the volatility in politics, whether it's anything from Greenland to talks of this government shutdown And then on the other side, just mechanically of the yen or of the Bank of Japan buying the yen, which is going to necessarily weaken the dollar as well. In addition, there was also some talks at the beginning of the week that the US Treasury might have been buying yen as well, working with the Bank of Japan directly to defend the yen and weaken the US dollar. So that really raised a lot of eyebrows as well. I don't think that there's official government numbers yet that are out confirming this. These things are released on a lag. But Scott Bessent, he was he was asked about this throughout the week. He was very kind of coy about how he responded to this.
Over time.
Are we intervening in the currency market right now, strengthening the yen? Is that happening?
Absolutely not.
Is that something you're planning to do? There was word that the New York Fed was looking for prices.
Again, we don't comment other than to say we have a strong dollar policy. And again, I think President Trump has the past year, 2025, was about setting the table. And now I think we're going to have a very strong economy this year. The Democrats don't shut down the government. The Atlanta Fed GDP now number is 5.4%. When was the last time we saw that?
It's a high growth number.
Yeah, nice sidestep there, Besson. He's been practicing that juke move, definitely. Absolutely not. 5.4% growth. Yeah, he was. Yeah, that was pretty good head fake. Hey, look over here. That was pretty funny. Yeah. No, absolutely not. What? Japan? Where's that? Growth is going to be great this year in America. Yeah, that was pretty good. That was pretty funny. Yeah, thanks for that. Coy. I guess.
But, especially given things like that, there was a lot of questions about this. So over the next month or so, whenever some of the financial statements come out for the Bank of Japan and for the U.S. Treasury, we'll get some more detail on if anything did happen or not. As we also talked about a few months ago, the U.S. did intervene in the Argentine peso market not too long ago. So it's really not such a crazy thing to think that even if it didn't happen, there's a decent possibility that it still could from here.
Yeah. You guys messing with the Japanese yen? Let's see. Strong dollar policy. Check out growth. How's that? All right, interesting.
I think they posed the question like a little bit differently, and he just kept saying strong dollar policy. And this is in the context of the dollar like weakening really sharply earlier in the week.
Right. Why does he want a strong dollar policy?
That's been the kind of ongoing stance of the dollar, kind of for a very long time now. I think it's kind of a natural downstream effect of having it be the global reserve currency. There's always a natural demand for dollars, whether it's through treasuries to collateralize transactions to being a official store of value for other countries.
Just thinking in terms of the trade deficit and all that. I guess if you have a weaker dollar, sort of translate into better. Right. That was a huge thing that they were pushing. I guess I'm just I can understand the word strong is good. And what you had just mentioned, having a lot of demand overseas for the dollar makes sense and is good. Just in the context of the trade deficit, you would almost want a weaker. But anyway, made some progress there. We should talk about that eventually.
That was Trump's comment on this just before that Bessent interview. That like, do you have any comment on the dollar? What's it's crashing right now, and it's doing great. Businesses love it, and it's true. For exporters, it's a really good thing, and it's good for the trade deficit. But there can be a lot of negatives that come along with that as well. So we're seeing similar questions around the Japanese yen right now. So we touched on recently that not that long ago, it was very rare for kind of really any volatility in Japanese government bonds. It was seen as a great store of value, maybe not very good yield, but definitely a store of value. And then similarly, buying the yen, it was seen as a safe haven asset. I think still is, but I think it's been questioned a little bit just given the high degree of volatility that's been introduced. You put all that together with kind of an uncertain fiscal outlook and uncertain politics. On top of that, it's the most indebted developed country out there. We're really kind of getting into uncharted territory here. It's really not clear what that means from here, but the U.S. isn't quite that bad, but there's a lot of similar threads in place. So it's going to be really interesting to watch how, specifically how Japan evolves over the coming months and years, and if these similarities with the U.S. end up continuing or not.
Yeah, well, something to look out for then. Absolutely.
All right. Well, that's about everything I had for you, Luke.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thanks, Joe. This has been another episode of the Root of All Evil podcast.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.